a lot of us are seniors or about to be seniors, but more importantly, a lot of us are taking care of seniors. And a lot of the things we discuss on this show are ways to prepare to take care of seniors, planning housing, things like that, planning disposition of possessions, making sure people don't get taken advantage of, finding the right health care addition to your Medicare, issues such as that. So if you're in this industry where you can help seniors, you can do something for seniors, come on our show. It's free to come on the show. Just go to CentralValleyTalk.com. Right on that page, you could click be a guest. You could sign up. You could be a guest on our show. And we'd love to have you. It's free to come on our show, by the way, and discuss these issues. We have lots of shows now. Besides this one, just today, we're going to have, coming up at 3 will be Mike and Athena Live. At 4 o'clock will be Everything Sparkle. 5 o'clock, April Davidson Show. She'll be entertaining some great local guests. Tomorrow, on Thursday, we start at 11 a.m. with authors and artists. At noon, we have our business show. At 2 o'clock, New Thought with Reverend Steve. And at 3 o'clock, the Real Estate and Home Improvement Show. So there's a show for everybody. We would like you to be on our show. Now, talking about seniors' issues, our next guest, Greg Wagstaff. I hope I have it right. Greg, are you there? Glen. Oh, there we go. Glen Wagstaff. Hi, Glen.
I'm here. Yeah. Thanks.
Tell me the name of your company again.
It's Vivos. We're a law firm, and we help with estate planning.
Vivos. Okay. And who should be doing estate planning? Just seniors, or should be people starting way younger than that?
Well, my kids are all under 7, and that's probably the most important time to have a plan, because if something were to happen to me, I'd want to make sure that the right people are going to raise them and take care of, assets and make sure that things are taken care of for them. So young families is actually probably the most vulnerable and most important to do estate planning, but we usually don't think about it until we're older.
Here I am, 61. I have no estate planning. Is it too late?
No, it's not too late. It's never too late. We want to make sure that it's in place well beforehand, but when you realize that it's something that's important, then that's when you should get it done.
To do it. Now, when you say estate planning, what kind of instruments are you talking about? Trusts, or are there other things? Wills, I guess.
Yeah, we always say it's not a question of whether you need an estate plan. It's a question of what kind of plan do you need. And so I share the story of my sister who was studying in college, and she was in her second year, not married, no kids, didn't have any property really, and she found herself unconscious in the hospital. And the hospital called my parents and asked them if they had a power of attorney for her or a healthcare directive of any kind, and of course they didn't. And so they said, well, your daughter's here, but we can't tell you anything, right? So it doesn't really matter what situation you're in and whether you're married or not, or kind of, whether you have somebody to depend on or not. It's important to have documents in place, because that's not automatic to allow somebody else to make decisions on your behalf. So at a minimum, financial and healthcare powers of attorney. And then once you're married or you have children, then it's important to have a will. And once you own real estate, then we recommend having a trust plan.
Trust?
Yeah, so a trust is a method to be able to empower somebody to be in charge of managing your property if something were to happen to you, and avoid the court system to do that. So if you don't have a trust, then most often you would end up in the process called probate, and it can take a long time. It can cost a lot of money. It can cause family problems very easily. It's a public process, and if you pass away and you happen to need probate, especially in California, it's very expensive. And so the best way to avoid that is with a properly structured trust.
A trust can avoid the whole probate then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, we're going through, you said your sister in college, and what happened. Let's say a young couple get married, they have 1 or 2 kids. What kind of things should they be planning?
Well, at that point, it's, again, just basic documents need to be in place. A lot of people assume that now we're married, so my husband, of course, is going to be able to make decisions for me if I ever need that. But that's not automatic. As an adult, you get to make decisions for yourself. And if you don't have documents in place to authorize another individual to receive information, then the HIPAA laws apply, and they might not be able to get information. Most of the time, between spouses, hospitals and medical practitioners are very generous in allowing you to make decisions. but there's also the question of liabilities. So depending on the circumstances, if you don't have proper documents in place, those decisions are not automatically allowed to be made by
Yes.
your spouse. So it's important to have, at a minimum, again, financial powers of attorney, healthcare documents that empower them to get information and to make decisions, and then probably to have a will to designate what you want to have happen with your belongings if something were to happen to you.
Now, if a young couple are married and they have a couple kids and the husband dies, um, does everything automatically go to the wife?
Well, so there's something called the law of intestacy, and if you don't have a will, then the state law will apply to how things are divided. So, in as a general rule, yes, everything's going to go to the surviving spouse. And if you own your property with you and your spouse on there on title, then the likelihood is that you're not going to have to worry about probate. But if both parents were to pass away, then that's
I
when the
see.
headaches come,
I see.
right?
It happens, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people right now are in this uncertainty of what's going to happen in the world. And one of my clients just recently, before this whole coronavirus thing happened, he was supposed to get on a cruise ship with his wife
Mm.
in Singapore, and they had a layover in Hong Kong, and because they had the layover there, they didn't allow them to get on the ship. Well, when they returned to the United States, one day later, there was a businessman from China that went to a conference with a few thousand people in Singapore, and he was the first, identified case that caused the
Oh boy.
breakout in Singapore for the coronavirus. So if he would have been there one day later, they would have gotten stuck outside the country and not be able to return. And he was in the middle of trying to do some business transactions. He wouldn't have been able to do that unless he had proper documents in place. So, I mean, everybody's at risk of potentially needing a proper estate plan. And it's not just when you die, it's also sometimes when
That's
you're
right.
alive.
That's right. I didn't think of that. So, and you guys are the experts at this. That's who. If somebody's thinking about this and saying, "Well, this guy's making a lot of sense. I got to contact him." How should they start? Should they just call you guys, or do you have a web address they should start with?
Yeah, so our website is intervivosplan.com. That's www.intervivosplan.com. And we have attorneys all over the country. So no matter where you're located, we can help. We're the largest estate planning law firm in the country currently. And, this is what we
So you
specialize
have
in.
offices all over then. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, I was probably a lot of young people or young married people think they're invincible. I sure thought I was, and I woke up the other day and I'm 61 now, and I'm thinking, wow, things went by fast. But anything could happen to a person my age. I've had friends I went from kindergarten with, and they're passing away, and you see younger people that are in car accidents or something, and things happen, and planning could be important, I would think.
It's very important, and it's also very important in very specific circumstances. If you think of a nightmare scenario that you would never want to have happen, right? Here's an example. One of our clients the other day down in Florida, he passed away quite suddenly, and it wasn't expected at all. But he was a single parent, and he had been divorced, right? His ex-wife was a nightmare. His children were all still minors, and he had full custody of them. But because he didn't leave anything in writing, his ex-wife was now going to be in charge of his estate and taking care of the children and everything else. And that was the nightmare scenario. But that's exactly what happened because he didn't have a plan.
Well, I guess nobody really plans to die. We all think we could go on forever, but it's pretty inevitable, I guess, and you better be ready for it. So, what's the first thing people should?
Well, that's the thing is you never plan to die,
It's
but
gonna
you know
happen.
it's going to
I
happen
don't
at
want to
some
think
point.
about it. All right. So you should start young then, even when you're going off to college, as in your example, when you're a young family. Things happen, and you got to be ready. It's part of taking, just like you get life insurance. Nobody would leave their kids without life insurance. This is probably just as important.
It is, and the scary part is that if you don't have a plan, the state allows any interested party to step in and nominate themselves as the guardian for your children or the person in charge of these things. And there's most families have somebody interested that's not the choice that they would want, right? I have some interested parties in my family that I don't want raising my kids, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Now, we used to, my wife and I, when we'd take a trip and leave the kids with my parents or my brother, I'd write a letter out and seal it in an envelope. Does that carry any weight?
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. And whenever you travel, it's important to specify who would be in charge in your absence. And even if you want to start with something just basic, there's something called a holographic will, and that is just writing out 100% in your own handwriting what you would want to have happen if something happened to you, and that will be honored. That will be valid in a probate court. So it's important to just make sure that it's all 100% in your handwriting if you want to go
But
that
then
route.
again, it's back to the court, and any interested party could step up and challenge that. So, what's the best way to do that?
Well, the best way is to work with a competent legal professional that can advise you, and at a minimum, have the consultation, and then make a decision. Once you're educated on what options are before you. But just because it sounds intimidating doesn't mean it has to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Nowadays we leverage a lot of technology, and it helps us to keep the price extremely affordable for families to do planning. And that wasn't always the case. You go back 20 years, and an attorney would have to draft everything on their own with a typewriter, right? Or maybe a little bit longer than 20 years. But the idea is that nowadays, a lot of it is turnkey, and for a basic plan, it doesn't have to be expensive, but it's essential for everybody.
uh, for the young family that's 30 years old with a couple kids, how often should they update that?
We recommend looking at your plan every few years. They call it a living trust for a reason, because as your situation changes, your plan should also adjust accordingly, right? So every 2 to 3 years, we recommend having a review of your plan and just making sure that things are up to date.
Now, I keep going back to young people because I regret that I didn't do certain things when I was young. A senior citizen has arrived and they have nothing in place. Where should they start? By talking to you, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Having a consultation is generally something that's either a minimal cost, or if they come, as a referral, or even from this show, let us know that you came from the show, and we'll give you a free consultation to be able to find out what your needs are. But that's a great place to start. The other thing you can do is just, read up or watch some videos, or, look online and find out a little bit about what you should be considering for your estate plan. And then either meet with somebody who can help you, or look into options.
Think they don't have anything in their estate, but I guess everybody does.
I always hear that, and sometimes it's true, and you don't have anything. But if you have children, you have an
Okay.
estate, right? If you own anything, here's another example. Most fights in estates are actually not about the money. And we had a client once that there was two sisters, and they were raised by their grandmother. And every night grandma would put them to bed, she would brush their
Uh-huh.
hair with a hairbrush. And so when grandma died, that's what both of them wanted from her, was the hairbrush. And they spent over $25,000 a piece fighting
Yeah.
over the hairbrush.
Right. And I tell you, I know so many families that have are estranged because of the death in the family and arguing over who gets what. And you're right, it was never money. And all the people I know, it was never money. So, um,
Well, and a lot of times it's not just about the stuff either. A lot of times it's, well, mom told me this. No, mom told me this, and they're both trying to honor, their loved one's wishes, but because nothing was specified in writing, it's difficult to do that. And what happens is the worst of us comes out sometimes in those scenarios, and people revert back to, when you were kids and you were fighting on the floor. Well, that's what they turned into again when mom and dad pass away, right?
and sometimes there's not a fight, but there's a lingering resentment that people don't realize is even there, and it comes out years later. I've seen it a few times. So, if a person's a senior, especially for seniors, got any advice? This is our senior show, and that's who's watching this show, and who we really want to give a message to.
Well, especially for seniors, there's three things that I would highly recommend considering. Number one, make sure you have a plan in place and you have those basic documents that we talked about. Number two, make sure that you have a plan for long-term care, how you're going to pay for care and so on, because I see a lot of seniors that get to the point where they need long-term care and they're going to qualify for Medicaid or Medi-Cal programs, and then they're surprised that they have to get rid of all their assets to be able to qualify. And there are ways to plan around that ahead of time if you meet with somebody that can help you with that, enough ahead of time. And then the third thing would be, if you do have a plan, make sure that your family knows that there's a plan and who they can contact if they have questions about the plan. And we recommend transparency and having communication, open communication among the family, just so that they know if anything were to happen to mom or dad, this is who would be in charge. And more or less, it doesn't have to be all the details, but this is what the plan would be.
That's good. Get it in place. And again, you could avoid probate and court fights, and by getting into a trust, which is kind of new ground for me. I didn't totally understand that until this very show. So thank you for doing that. Listen, we're really out of time. Anything else you want our viewers to know?
No, just feel free to reach out. Look us up online, www.intervivosplan.com, or you can contact us at 855-335-1060. That's 855-335-1060. And again, right now, these uncertain times, but what provides you with peace of mind is being prepared before these emergencies
Now,
happen.
and you said very generously for our viewers, make sure you go in and say, I heard you guys on Central Valley Talk. You offered me a free, what do you call, consultation? Free consultation. And I mean, it's going to cost some money, but go to the consultation, find out what it's going to cost you, and I think you get much more comfortable with that. So we really appreciate you coming on the show and experimenting with this new technology. Our guests are usually sitting right next to us, so this is probably the way we're going to do it for some time to come. But we appreciate it, and we'll have you back every month or so. I think that would be great.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again for the invite, and stay safe.
All right, we'll see you next time. We'll be back with more seniors issues right after this.